Imagine holding a baby in your arms knowing that no one else in the world wants it. And now imagine finding out 10 years later something so shocking that it leaves you speechless. This story will make you believe in the impossible. This isn't just a story about love or sacrifice. It's a story about a secret that took a decade to be revealed. Get ready, because you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, and you're going to feel every emotion along with this brave nurse who changed the fate of a rejected baby. In the small town where Sarah worked as a nurse, the hospital's maternity ward was almost always a place of joy. Screams of newborns filled the corridors, and overjoyed parents took photos, celebrating the start of new journeys. But that night, the atmosphere was different. At the end of her shift, Sarah noticed an unusual buzz among the doctors. As she entered the neonatal ward, she saw something she would never forget. At the back of the room, separated from the other babies, was a newborn wrapped in a white blanket. He looked calm, but around him there was obvious restlessness. "What's going on?" she asked a colleague. "This baby has been abandoned," replied the doctor, shaking his head in disapproval. "The parents don't want anything to do with him. They said he's the hospital's problem now." The words hit Sarah like a punch in the gut. She approached the small crib and looked at the baby. He was tiny, with delicate fingers and eyes that could barely open. Even so, something about him gripped her. "Why have they abandoned him? What's wrong with him?" she asked. The doctor hesitated before answering. "They claimed personal reasons, but there are rumors. He could have some health condition, something genetic. They didn't want to wait for a diagnosis. They just left." The coldness of the situation bothered Sarah deeply. It was hard to imagine how someone could simply turn their back on such a fragile life. A sense of injustice burned in her chest, but she knew she couldn't do anything about it. Or could she? That evening, as she prepared to go home, Sarah passed the neonatal ward again. She stopped in front of the baby's crib and watched for a long time. He was awake, looking in her direction with an expression that seemed curious. Sarah held out her hand, and the baby gripped her finger tightly, as if begging for something he couldn't put into words. On the way home, the image of that little face never left her mind. The thought of him being thrown into the foster care system with no one to look after him was unbearable. She thought of the many cases she had seen, children going from home to home, growing up without stability, without love. What if no one wanted him? The words she had heard earlier came back like a cruel echo. No one will want that baby. Sarah was a practical woman. She knew that her life was already busy, that her job demanded a lot, and that raising a child, especially one with possible health problems, will be a huge responsibility. But there was something on her conscience that wouldn't let her rest. "If I don't do anything, who will?" she asked herself. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She contacted social services and began the process of adopting the baby. At first, she was met with suspicious looks. "You know, this isn't like looking after just any child, right? This baby may have special needs. We don't know exactly what he has yet," she was told. But Sarah was firm. "I know it will be hard, but he deserves a chance. Everyone does." The following months were a roller coaster of emotions. Sarah faced interviews, home visits, and a complete analysis of her life to prove that she was capable of looking after Michael, the name she chose for the baby. During this time, Michael was under the care of the hospital, and Sarah made a point of visiting him every day after work. She sang to him, fed him, and cradled him in her arms, just like a mother would. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah got custody of Michael, and he went home with her. But she soon realized that the real journey had only just begun. Michael seemed healthy, but there were peculiarities that worried Sarah. He cried more than usual, had trouble sleeping, and sometimes seemed extremely sensitive to noises or lights. In addition, The community's reaction was mixed. Many praised Sarah for her courage, but others looked at her skeptically, questioning her decision to adopt a child that nobody wanted. Some people even made cruel comments, such as, "Didn't you have another option? A healthy baby, perhaps." But Sarah never let it get her down. For her, Michael was perfect, even with the challenges they faced. Her love for him was immense, and she was determined to give him a life full of happiness and security. Still, Michael's past remained a mystery. There was something about that baby's story that didn't make sense. Why had his biological parents abandoned him so quickly? Why was there so much resistance to giving any explanation? These questions plagued her, but she chose to focus on the present, believing that love would be enough to overcome any obstacle. Little did Sarah know that the answers to these questions were closer than she imagined, and that a decade later, they would come to light in a way that would change their lives forever. The years passed, and Sarah dedicated her life to caring for Michael. From his first steps to his first words, his every achievement was celebrated as a personal triumph. But the challenges were undeniable. In his early years, Michael began to present difficulties that made Sarah even more worried. He was extremely sensitive to loud sounds, avoided eye contact for long periods, and had outbursts of crying that were difficult to calm down. Despite his apparently normal physical development, there was something different about his behavior. Sarah, determined as ever, decided to look for answers. Doctors' appointments became a constant in their lives. Neurologists, pediatricians, occupational therapists, Sarah took Michael to every specialist she could find. After months of tests, she finally received a diagnosis: autism spectrum disorder. Although the diagnosis brought clarity, it also brought a flood of new challenges. Sarah knew she would need resources, support, and an extra dose of patience to help Michael navigate the world. She began immersing herself in books and studies on autism, learning everything she could to ensure that Michael had the best opportunities. She enrolled him in specialized therapies, worked with him at home, and even made adjustments to her own life to meet his needs. Each of Michael's small victories, such as learning to tie his shoes or interacting with other children, was a reward for Sarah's tireless efforts. But she also faced judgmental looks and invasive questions from people who didn't understand the situation. Despite everything, Michael was a sweet, curious, and lively child. He had a special fascination with puzzles and music. He could spend hours putting pieces together, trying to reproduce melodies on the old piano that Sarah had bought at a garage sale. It was in these moments that Sarah saw something brilliant in Michael, something that made her believe that he had an extraordinary future ahead of him, even if the path was different from the conventional one. But what Sarah couldn't ignore was the emptiness that still surrounded Michael's past. Questions about his biological parents returned like ghosts from time to time. Why had they abandoned him? And why had they never tried to contact him again? To protect Michael, she avoided broaching the subject, but she knew that one day he would ask these questions himself. This concern became more intense when Michael began to realize that his life was different. At the age of 8, during a casual conversation, he asked Sarah, "Why don't I have a father or a mother like the other boys at school?" Sarah's heart squeezed. She had always known that this moment would come, but she had never felt ready. With a lump in her throat, she explained to him that some families were different, but that the love between them was greater than anything. Michael accepted the answer for a while, but as he got older, his curiosity grew. He began to ask more direct questions and even expressed feelings of anger and confusion. "If they didn't want me, did I do something wrong?" he asked. Each of these words was like a stab in Sarah's heart, but she did her best to comfort him, assuring him that he was not to blame for anything. It was during one of these conversations that Sarah made an important decision. She knew she couldn't hide the truth from Michael forever. He deserved to know who he was and where he came from, even if the answers were painful. After much thought, she decided to look for information about his biological parents. Despite the fear of what she might discover, Sarah felt it was her duty as a mother. The following weeks were filled with phone calls, emails, and visits to adoption agencies and registry offices. Every door seemed to close before she even had the chance to knock. Information was scarce, and Michael's case seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mystery. The hospital records indicated that the birth parents had signed the abandonment papers without leaving many details. But Sarah didn't give up. She began to investigate on her own, going through the documents carefully, looking for any clue that might lead her to the truth. One of those nights, going through old hospital papers, she found something that made her stop. Among the medical notes, there was a name that didn't appear in the official records. The doctor who had supervised Michael's birth and who, for some reason, didn't appear on any other document. This discovery reignited Sarah's determination. She knew that something was being hidden, and she was willing to go to any lengths to find out. The next morning, she contacted the hospital where Michael had been born and asked for an appointment with the doctor mentioned in the document. When she arrived at the office, she was greeted with cautious looks. The doctor, now retired, seemed to hesitate before speaking, but after a few questions, he let out a sentence that changed everything. "I remember that case, but you're not going to like what you're about to hear." It was as if a door to the past was about to open. Sarah felt a mixture of fear and hope. She knew that what came next could change not only Michael's life, but hers too. The journey to discover the truth was just beginning, and Sarah had no idea that the answers lay far beyond what she could have imagined. When the retired doctor finally began to speak, Sarah's world seemed to spin in slow motion. He hesitated, as if pondering the words before letting them slip out. Michael wasn't just abandoned. There's something else, something that was never put in the documents. Sarah felt a shiver run up her spine. The doctor continued, explaining that, at the time, he had been forced to accept an order of silence about Michael's case. The reason? Michael's biological parents were involved in something much bigger than a simple story of abandonment. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. The doctor explained that Michael's biological mother was a 19-year-old girl called Emily, who had given birth in extremely delicate circumstances. She was desperate, with no family support, and had made the decision to give the baby up for adoption. But that wasn't the end of the story. The biological father, on the other hand, was an influential man connected to a corruption scheme in a large pharmaceutical company. He had found out about Emily's pregnancy too late, and in order to protect his reputation and prevent the baby from linking him to personal scandals, he had lobbied to have Michael's record erased and the case kept secret. Sarah's heart squeezed. She imagined the impact of this truth on Michael. As much as she wanted to protect her son from all this, she knew that the story of his past was beginning to unfold in a way that could not be stopped. The revelation also sparked a disturbing question. Why, after so many years, had no one looked for Michael? Did his biological father still see him as a threat? Was Michael in danger? The doctor, sensing Sarah's distress, handed her an envelope that he had kept all this time. This arrived for Emily a few days after Michael was born. She asked me to keep it because she was afraid of what might happen. Maybe it's time you saw it. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a photo. The letter, written in haste, sounded like a cry of despair from Emily, telling her that she had been forced to separate from her baby and warning her about the biological father, a man with resources and no intention of allowing Michael's existence to be revealed. The photo showed something even more striking. Emily holding Michael just after he was born. It was the first time Sarah had seen the face of her son's biological mother. There was something in Emily's eyes that seemed to convey both love and fear. Sarah felt a whirlwind of emotions. On the one hand, she wanted to find Emily to give Michael the chance to meet his birth mother. On the other, she knew that this could open a dangerous and unpredictable chapter. Determined to continue the search, Sarah began to dig deeper into the identity of the biological father. She used every connection she had, from friends in the health field to legal contacts. But with every door opened, new complications arose. Sarah discovered that the man, now a billionaire tycoon, had gone on to build an empire, but was also involved in shady scandals that never came to light publicly. He was someone who would do anything to protect his image. The dilemma weighed on Sarah. Should she expose Michael to this truth? The boy, now 10, had grown up surrounded by Sarah's unconditional love, but he also struggled with questions about his identity. Sarah knew that for him, discovering this part of his story could answer many of those questions, but at what cost? Meanwhile, Michael began to notice Sarah's nervousness. He was already perceptive by nature and began to ask more frequent questions about why she was always on the phone or so distracted. One evening, while they were having dinner, Michael looked straight into Sarah's eyes and said, "You're hiding something from me, aren't you? Is it about who I am?" Sarah knew she couldn't put it off any longer. She sat down with Michael that same evening and explained, as carefully as possible, that she had discovered some information about her biological parents. "But I don't know everything yet, darling. I'm trying to understand what's best for you." Michael was silent for a moment and then replied something that took Sarah by surprise. "I just want to know the truth. Whatever it is, I can handle it." These words echoed in Sarah's mind as she made the most difficult decision of her life. She knew that in order to protect Michael, she would have to face him with the truth and possibly face the man who had done so much to erase her own son's existence. More than ever, Sarah felt she was on the edge of a revelation that could change everything, for better or for worse. The journey so far had been intense, but the next step would be even more challenging. She was about to enter uncharted territory, where the truth she uncovered would not only impact Michael's future, but also test the strength of the unconditional love that had always bound them together. With her heart racing and a mixture of nerves and determination, Sarah prepared herself for what would be the most important meeting of her life and Michael's. Through her investigations, she managed to track down Emily, Michael's biological mother. Through her investigations, she managed to track down Emily, Michael's biological mother, who now lived in a small town, far away from all the turmoil that had marked her past. When Emily received the news from Sarah, she was shocked, but also emotional. She had always carried the weight of the decision to abandon Michael, fearing that she would never have the chance to see him again. At the same time, Sarah had gathered enough courage to confront Michael's biological father, who was determined to keep his reputation intact at any cost. Meeting Emily was fraught with emotion. When Michael finally met her, he didn't feel anger or rejection, but rather a mixture of curiosity and compassion. Listening to Emily tell her side of the story, Michael realized that abandonment was not an act of contempt, but a painful choice made by someone who was fighting against forces much greater than herself. Emily cried as she asked for forgiveness, but Michael, in his youthful wisdom and pure heart, simply said, "You did what you thought was right. I am who I am today because of it." On the other side of this story, Sarah faced Michael's biological father with a stance that mixed courage and control. He tried to intimidate her, offering money and threatening legal action, but Sarah made it clear that she wasn't looking for revenge or scandal, just the truth. She showed Emily's letters, the evidence linking Michael to him, and said, "This isn't about you. This is about a boy who deserves to know where he came from, even if you never accept him into your life." Faced with the evidence and Sarah's firmness, he backed down. Although he showed no intention of getting close to Michael, he agreed to let the case rest, ensuring that no one else interfered in the boy's life. In the end, Sarah, Michael, and Emily constructed a new narrative. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was true. Sarah continued to be the mother Michael had always known, the woman who chose him and loved him above all circumstances. Emily, even from a distance, became a presence that brought a piece of Michael's story to light. Together, they created a unique bond, proving that family is not only defined by blood, but by the ties we choose to strengthen, even in the most challenging situations. As Sarah looked at Michael playing in the backyard, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced for a long time. The boy no one once wanted had become the greatest gift of her life, and together, they had faced and overcome a truth that could have driven them apart, but which, in the end, brought them even closer together. Just for those of you who like a good story and have watched to the end, leave your comment below from which city you're watching. And there's one more thing. A racist pilot attacked Snoop Dogg in first class, but what happened next shocked everyone. That's the subject of the next video I've pinned to the screen. Just click and watch. I'll see you there.